It's embarrassing to be in love, but it's even more embarrassing to talk to Homeland Security about it. Hello, I'm Madeline, or just Maddie, and I usually talk about books, but today I'm talking about something else. Government bureaucracy. Specifically about the K-1 visa, also known as the 90-day fiancé visa, what it is, why the process is the way it is, and what my experience with it has been like so far through the approval of the I-129F petition for alien fiancé. Fun. In a way, this video is still kind of about a book because our initial application was close to 125 pages long. A quick disclaimer before I get into everything. I am not a lawyer, nor do I work in any immigration-related field. Everything I know about this topic has come either from the internet or my own personal experience, so if you're actually going to go through the process of applying, do not let this be your sole resource for doing that. Thank you. Immigration is really complicated. There are many different avenues. I know nothing about almost any of them, but let's talk a little bit about where the K-1 visa came from. During the Vietnam War, US soldiers were meeting and dating and falling in love with women overseas, but it was really hard to get their partners back to the US if they wanted to get married, and that difficulty led to the creation of the K-1 visa. You bring your partner over, you get married within 90 days, and then they get to stay in the US. There's also the CR1 visa, which is a spousal visa, meaning you get married in a foreign country first, then apply for your spouse to immigrate to the United States after you are already married. My fiance and I decided to do the K-1 visa instead of the spousal visa for a couple different reasons, none of which are that interesting or relevant. During this very long process, many well-intentioned people in our lives have asked, can't you just get married now and then deal with the visa stuff later? No, we can't. We cannot do that. Because if we got married while we were in the process of applying for the K-1 visa, he would no longer be my fiance, so we would no longer be eligible for the fiancé visa. We would have to get out of the K-1 line, go reapply, this time for the CR1 spousal visa, and then we would be at the back of the line. And during that time, he would not be allowed to live in the United States. He could come and visit with like time limits that you have for a tourist visa, but he would not be able to live here indefinitely. He couldn't work. Like, there would be lots of complications with that, so in our case, it was best to just stay in the line we're in and hope for the best. Yeah, it's complicated. And guess what else it is? Incredibly boring. There's a reason that TLC, in the whole 90-Day Fiancé cinematic universe, has yet to make a spin-off that's 90-Day Fiancé, the application phase, because it would just be hard to understand, frustrating, and mind-numbingly boring. We did not use a lawyer for this process because it's kind of expensive and it didn't really seem worth it because we have all the green flags for a K-1 visa couple. We have never been married, we have no kids, no criminal backgrounds. We've never tried to apply for this visa before with other people. We have spent lots of time together in person and can prove it. Same first language, similar religious beliefs, no big age gap, like all that stuff is very much in order, so we figured we could take care of it on our own, and so far so good. It's not impossible to get a fiancé visa if those things aren't the case though. From what I've seen and kind of researched, having a fairly significant age gap is pretty typical in a K-1 visa situation. I was kind of surprised at the relative lack of diversity in K-1 visa couples. They mostly follow a pretty similar formula. The large majority of K-1 beneficiaries, so the non-Americans, are women. I think it's like 80%, and most of those women are from Asia. Over 40% of beneficiaries overall are from an Asian country. The most popular is the Philippines, and second most common is Vietnam. One source I found, and I'll try to remember to link it in the description, but if I forget, somebody remind me, said the average petitioner is a white male in his 40s, and the average beneficiary is an Asian female in her mid to late 20s. So all that to say, age gaps are pretty common in this scenario, definitely not a deal breaker. But regardless of where your partner's from or what age you are, everybody has to go through the same application and vetting process for the K-1 visa. The goal of this process, to my understanding, is twofold. Let me emphasize this is to my understanding of the rationale behind this whole thing. I could totally be missing something. Goal number 1 is to avoid exploitation. Goal number 2 is to avoid the beneficiary becoming a burden on the US government after they've immigrated. So they want to be relatively sure that this person isn't going to get arrested a bunch of times, and they want to be sure that the American who sponsored them is able to financially support them without government assistance. You gotta dance with the one that brung ya. Does that phrase make sense here? The financial stuff and the background check stuff comes up more so later in the process, so let's for now discuss exploitation. There are lots of different opportunities for exploitation in this process from many different sides. The couple could be exploiting the system. This is like a Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds in the proposal situation, where there's no real romantic relationship, they're just using marriage as a fast pass for immigration. The beneficiary can be exploiting the petitioner. So in that scenario, the American thinks that they are going to get married and live happily ever after. The foreign-born person plans to come to the US, get married, get their green card, and then leave the person they married so they can go live their fun single life with their green card. And of course, there's the possibility of the American exploiting or even trafficking the beneficiary. And that one is very scary, because imagine coming to America, you don't necessarily know the culture, you might not know the language as a first language, might not be entirely fluent, and then your whole network is this person you married, their friends, their family, their like neighbors and coworkers and everything. So if you're being mistreated by that person, it can be really intimidating or difficult or complicated to try to reach out for help, and you might worry that you're going to be deported. That's terrifying, and no one wants that to happen to a person. So throughout the K-1 visa process, the government's kind of keeping an eye out for red flags that suggest there's a transactional undercurrent or someone's being taken advantage of in the relationship. You don't have a common language, or you have barely spent any time together, or your friends and family don't know about the relationship, stuff like that. Understanding that the government wants some kind of proof that things are all copacetic, how do couples go about providing that? Please welcome the I-129F petition for alien fiancé. We're getting into the application. So there are several major requirements for a K-1 visa. Number one, the US-based petitioner has to be a United States citizen. Hell yeah, baby, born and raised, eagle screech. Number two, both parties have to be free to marry, so like of legal marrying age and also not currently married to other people. Number three, the couple has to have met in person within the last 2 years, even if it's just for a couple of hours. Number four, the couple has to intend to get married within 90 days of the beneficiary's arrival on US soil. Why 90 days? I don't know. That might not all sound overly complicated, but those are the bare bone basic level requirements. You still have to provide evidence for all of those things and then more on top of that. And that's where that 120 plus page application comes in. The petition for alien fiancé, the I-129F, that's the first thing you submit as part of the K-1 visa process. The actual I-129F form itself isn't that long. I think it's close to 15 pages. And that's where you fill in stuff like our address histories and work histories from the last 5 years, our parents' current addresses and their countries of birth. I had to confirm that he and I are not related to one another and did not meet through an international marriage broker. If we had met on a dating site, we would have had to submit the terms and conditions of that website just to prove that it's not an international marriage broker. So that's just the actual government form itself. All the rest of those pages that we submitted were evidence to back up what we said on the form. We had evidence of in-person meeting, evidence of ongoing relationship, and evidence of intent to marry. Here's the thing. It's weird to put together a government document about your romantic relationship. That is a bizarre task. And striking the right balance of like qualitative and quantitative data to back up your claim that you plan to have a long-lasting, genuine, and healthy relationship with your partner, that is not a recipe for like a tear-jerking love story. Also, you're not technically required to be in love to get the K-1 visa. But I do think some people treat the supplemental evidence as like the opportunity to tell their love story. I even saw this girl make a video about putting together their application. And at one point, she had made an actual scrapbook of her relationship with her fiance. Like this sweet, cute thing. And then someone stepped in to tell her just how unhappy United States Citizenship and Immigration Services would be to receive that with her petition, and she sort of amended her ways. It was not about it was about the formatting. Like, they don't want a bound book with your application. We'll talk about their very specific requests for how you put together your evidence maybe in another video, but like, yeah, they would be not thrilled to get a bound scrapbook. All that to say, we definitely didn't get too like flowery with our application. My fiance has degrees in engineering and computer science, so he's all about being thorough and having the facts. And I, meanwhile, have terminal Midwesterner syndrome, which is I think the rules are mostly for other people, and I should be allowed to do whatever I want as long as my intentions are good and people sort of understand the gist of what I'm trying to accomplish. In this particular scenario, he got his way, and we submitted so much evidence. I won't go into extreme detail here with what ended up in our I-129F packet. I'll probably make a very detailed video for future applicants so they can see how we did it. I always appreciated seeing those when we were researching. But I can give you some examples of what we submitted for supplemental evidence in the different sections. For evidence of in-person meeting, we had lots of photos of us together. Duh! We would put those on one side and then in another column have the date and then kind of a description of what's going on in the photo. We also had boarding passes for flights in that evidence section. Our credit card statements with charges highlighted that were related to things we did together, so like parking at airports or going out for dinner, and then we would also include a photo of us at the restaurant from the credit card charge. We also included a couple of notarized letters from friends and family stating that they have seen us together in person, they believe we're legit, and they're excited for us to get married. This is all so romantic. A lot of the stuff in that section could also count for evidence of ongoing relationship, but on top of that, we also included screenshots of emails that my dad and my fiance exchanged with one another, screenshots of our Skype call logs showing how much time we spent on Skype together, receipts for gifts that we sent each other, a receipt for a Christmas gift I sent his parents, some other stuff like that. The evidence of intent to marry section was much harder. If you look online, I think even on like the USCIS website, they suggest including evidence like receipts for deposits paid to vendors, a copy of a wedding invitation, etc. I'm here to tell you right now, if you are applying for the K-1 visa, do not go putting big deposits on venues before you've even submitted your I-129F petition. That way lies madness, because you have no idea when their petition will be approved or when you'll be through the process. Once your beneficiary gets their visa in hand, they only have a couple months before they have to use it or it's no longer valid. And then once they use it and get to the US, you only have 90 days to get married. So that's not a very big window. And good luck guessing when that window will occur. Don't do it. Maybe the exception is if you're planning to do a courthouse ceremony right when they get here and then do a bigger like wedding celebration later on so you can give yourself a more generous estimate. But even then, having the receipt for the deposit on the venue for the celebration that's maybe long after your person has arrived in the US isn't going to help you because they want evidence that you're going to get married within 90 days. Anyway, so what did we end up submitting for our evidence of intent to marry? The receipt for my engagement ring. My fiance was very unhappy that I got to see it, but like I said, he loves being thorough and we didn't have a whole lot of other evidence for this section, so it went in there. We also included screenshots of emails that we exchanged with the priest who's going to officiate our wedding. We didn't have a specific date, but we reached out to ask if he would perform our ceremony even though he's retired. We talked a little bit about the logistics of doing marriage prep, so like the classes or meetings that you do before your wedding, how we could handle that with my fiance being in a different country. So just some stuff to show that we were taking the logistics of wedding planning seriously. We included that. We had some other stuff in this evidence section too, but this is so dumb. I put together a save the date card with a very optimistic wedding date printed on it, slipped that in with our supplemental evidence, and in the description said it was a save the date card shared with family and friends. Did I technically share it with family and friends? Yes. I never said how many family and friends, and I never said they were supposed to take it seriously. But USCIS clearly doesn't care if anyone was saving the date or not, because we didn't even get our petition approval until 3 or 4 months after the date on that card. So don't listen to anyone who says you get pushed through the process faster if they think you have a date set. They don't care. We also panicked a little because we were worried that they would see the save the date in our packet and think that we went ahead and got married on that date anyway, even without our approval, which would then mean that we wouldn't get our K-1 visa and they would knock us over to the CR1 visa line. Even if it was not a legal wedding, if you're married enough, they can kick you over there. So in a fit of paranoia, I set all my social media pages to public, so if anyone from the government wanted to comb through and see if I'd been tagged in any wedding pictures, they would come up with nothing. This process is so fun. For all this supplemental stuff, we were just throwing things at the wall to see what stuck, because there's no such thing really as airtight evidence. So much stuff can be faked, you never really know, so our goal was just to overwhelm them with effort and examples. No one in my life will ever get to look through our entire supplemental evidence packet. There's already something sort of inherently embarrassing about being in love, and it's even more embarrassing when you're trying to prove it to a government agency. And some of the descriptions we wrote with our photos are just so lame. Hi Homeland Security, here's a picture of us together going out for dinner. We like going out for dinner. We also like supporting local businesses and the American farmer. And we plan to donate our organs when we die. That's a slight exaggeration, but it has the spirit of it. It's just dumb. Overall, our petition was not cute, but it was functional because 375 days after it was received by United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, our petition was approved. Yay! Out of this hell and on to the next. So what were we doing during the 375 days between submission and approval? Desperately trying to predict when that approval would come. Here are some of the things we did. I joined a Facebook group. I'll put the link for it in the description. There are some extremely helpful and knowledgeable people in there. We also constantly checked the USCIS website to check out the estimated processing times. This part's gonna get boring, so buckle up. So when we applied the estimated processing time window, so that meant that 80% of cases were approved or denied within that window, was 8 to 10 months from submission. So we were planning on 8 to 10 months. Very shortly after we submitted our petition, the estimated processing time went from 8 to 10 months to 15.5 months, and then very shortly after that went up to 16.5 months, and we started freaking out. We were also confused because we couldn't really tell if that updated processing time applied to everybody or if that was for new applicants starting now, if that makes sense. Fortunately, I'm from a state with a low population, and what happens when you're from a state with a low population is you just kind of end up knowing people who work for your legislators, even if you're not generally politically connected. So a girl that I was in choir with in college works for one of our senators, and after about 8 months of waiting after we submitted our application, we reached out to her to see if she could at least have the senator's office inquire on our behalf with USCIS to see if the estimated processing time, that new 16.5 months one, applied to us or not. She was amazing. She was thrilled to help us out. She knew exactly what to do. It sounds like it's something that legislators deal with a lot. And long story short, it did apply to us. We were on the 16.5 month track. Boo. But the bright spot, we still got approved, like I said, within 375 days because USCIS is just bad at estimating. That 16.5 months estimation was based on historical data, and so between a pandemic, a labor shortage, and a previous administration that was not stoked about immigration, there was some bottlenecking that was still being shown in the current estimations. It wasn't basing things on how things were actually going. The single most helpful resource we found in trying to predict our wait time was trackmyvisanow.com. It was a very new resource at the time, and it was created by a couple who had applied for the K-1 visa and just wanted a better way to guess how long they were going to be waiting for approval. So they built this tool using current processing data from USCIS, not the historical data that they use on their website. They had current rates, so they could do predictive modeling, and all we had to do was put in the month that we had submitted our application, and then it would predict a window of time in which we should hear back from USCIS about our approval. We got our notice right in the middle of that prediction that tool made for us. It was excellent. And I think now they are charging for it, which is great, and as well they should, because it's a very cool thing, and I'm sure they put a lot of time into refining it. At the time I was using it, it was free, but they had their Venmo at the bottom, so I would just throw $5 at them occasionally, thank you. But that was awesome. It helped us plan for things a lot more, and go them. Thank you to them. So that's basically the first part of the K-1 visa process. You put together your application, you wait over a year to hear back on the application, and then there's a bunch of other little stuff you have to do before your fiance can come to America. Since the time I wrote out my notes for this video, my fiance and I have progressed in the process, and we are now so very close to him actually setting foot on American soil. We are very excited. I might make a follow-up with the stuff from these last few stages of the process, just if anyone's interested in that. They're a lot more action-packed than the first part, but they're also So confusing. I had to get a letter from my bank and from my HR department. My fiance had to send a money order to Trinidad in exchange for one piece of paper. Also, probably expect a more detailed video on how we assembled our packet, specifically with like the very in-depth formatting requests from USCIS. That'll be interesting to a small number of people, but I'll put it out into the universe anyway. This video is probably way longer than it needed to be, but I'm partially making it for my future grandchildren, so they can write a personal narrative essay about how Grandpa moved to this country in the name of true love, and eventually learned how to operate a snowblower and play cornhole. Because that's the American dream. Now subscribe if you like books. Goodbye. I like my men the way I like my beer. Imported.